At 78 years old, Eleanor thought the hardest part of life was already behind her. She had buried her husband, raised 2 children, survived decades of sacrifice, loneliness, and quiet endurance. She believed she had earned something simple in return, a peaceful ending. But she was wrong, because one cold morning, standing on her own front porch, a piece of paper changed everything. Eviction notice. Her son wouldn't meet her eyes. Her daughter stood silent. The home she had built, brick by brick, memory by memory, was no longer hers. And just like that, she became invisible. But this isn't where her story ends, because days later, alone, tired, and with nowhere left to go, Eleanor found something no one else knew existed: a hidden path, a forgotten key, and a locked cabin deep in the woods, with her name on it. What she discovered inside wasn't just a secret. It was a truth her family tried to bury, a legacy they never wanted her to find. And by the time they realized what she had become, it was already too late. The morning Eleanor was evicted, the sky looked unfairly beautiful. Soft sunlight spilled across the garden she had planted with her husband 40 years ago. The roses were blooming early that year, as if they didn't understand what was about to happen. Eleanor stood on the porch, her hands trembling slightly, holding the paper. "I don't understand," she said quietly. Her son, David, shifted uncomfortably. He avoided her gaze, focusing instead on the gravel beneath his shoes. "It's just temporary, Mom," he muttered. "We're restructuring things. The house needs to be sold." "Sold?" Her voice cracked. "This is my home." Her daughter Linda stepped forward, her tone sharper. "It's not just your home anymore. Legally, it's in our names too. You signed the transfer papers, remember?" Eleanor's chest tightened. Yes, she remembered. It had been after her husband passed. She was grieving, confused. They told her it was just paperwork, something to make things easier. She had trusted them. I thought. Eleanor swallowed hard. "I thought that was just for safety." "It is," Linda replied quickly. "For us. For the family." The word family echoed in Eleanor's mind like a cruel joke. By the afternoon, her belongings were packed into 2 old suitcases. No one offered to help her stay. No one asked where she would go. That hurt more than anything else. Eleanor walked for hours that day. Her legs ached, her breath came in shallow bursts, but she kept moving. She didn't want anyone to see her sitting, defeated, like something discarded. By evening, she found herself near the edge of a wooded area she vaguely recognized from her younger years. There was something about the place, something familiar. She sat on a fallen log, trying to gather her strength. "I must have come here before," she whispered to herself. And then, like a distant memory pushing through fog, it came back. Her husband, Thomas, he used to bring her here decades ago. They would walk, laugh, dream about building something small, something just for them. A cabin. Eleanor's heart skipped. "No, that was just a dream," she said under her breath. But something pulled her deeper into the woods. Step by step, she followed an overgrown path, her hands brushing against branches, her breath steadying with a strange sense of purpose. And then she saw it. Hidden behind tall trees and vines stood a small, weathered cabin. It looked abandoned, forgotten, but not destroyed. Eleanor approached slowly, her heart pounding. The door was locked. Of course it was. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. "Even the past won't let me in," she murmured. But then she noticed something, a loose brick near the doorway. Her fingers moved instinctively, pulling it free. And inside, a small, rusted key. Eleanor froze. Her hands shook as she stared at it. "No, this can't be." With hesitant steps, she moved toward the door. The key slid into the lock with a soft, almost haunting click. For a moment, everything felt still, like the world itself was holding its breath. She turned the key. The door creaked open. Dust floated in the air as light filtered through broken windows. Inside, the cabin was simple: a wooden table, 2 chairs, a fireplace. But it wasn't empty. On the table sat a box, perfectly placed, as if it had been waiting. Eleanor stepped inside slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Thomas," she whispered. The box was old but well preserved. On top of it was a note, her name, written in her husband's unmistakable handwriting. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. "My dearest Eleanor," she read aloud softly. "If you're reading this, it means you found our place." Tears blurred her vision. "Our place," she repeated. The words hit deeper than anything her children had said that day. This was where she belonged. She opened the box. Inside were documents, letters, photographs, and something else. A sealed envelope labeled, "Only when you need it most." Eleanor closed her eyes, overwhelmed. For the first time in days, she didn't feel lost. She felt found. That night, Eleanor slept inside the cabin. The air was cold. The floor was hard. But she felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. She wasn't alone. Not really. The next morning, she began reading everything Thomas had left behind. And that's when her world changed forever. Because hidden within those documents was something her children never knew existed. Something Thomas had kept secret. Something meant only for her. A property deed. Multiple properties. Investments. And a note that would shatter everything she thought she knew. "I never trusted them with this," the letter read. "Not because they are bad, but because they don't understand what we built. This is yours, Eleanor. Always was. Always will be." Eleanor stared at the papers in disbelief. Her hands shook. Her children had thrown her out, thinking she had nothing left. But they were wrong. She had everything. The days that followed were unlike anything Eleanor had experienced before. At first, she moved slowly, carefully, as if afraid the truth might disappear if she rushed. Every document she read, every letter she unfolded, revealed a version of her husband she had never fully seen. Thomas had planned everything. Not out of secrecy, but out of protection. He had built a quiet empire. Small properties, long-term investments, hidden savings. Never flashy, never obvious. All under Eleanor's name. But with conditions. Conditions that prevented anyone else from accessing it. Unless Eleanor herself claimed it. "They can't take what they don't know exists," she whispered, reading his words again. For the first time in her life, she understood. He had seen something coming. Weeks passed. Eleanor cleaned the cabin. She repaired what she could. She lit the fireplace again. And slowly, the place came back to life. But more importantly, so did she. One morning, she looked at herself in a cracked mirror. Her face was older, yes, wrinkled, tired. But her eyes were different, stronger. "I'm not done," she said firmly. And that was the moment everything shifted. Eleanor began making calls. She visited offices. She met people who once worked with her husband. At first, they were skeptical. An elderly woman, walking in with worn clothes and quiet confidence. But then she showed them the documents, the signatures, the proof, and suddenly, everything changed. "Mrs. Eleanor, we've been trying to locate you for years," one man said, stunned. "These assets, they've been waiting to be claimed. Waiting. Just like the cabin. Just like the key." Meanwhile, her children were struggling. The house sale didn't go as planned. Debt surfaced. Unexpected costs appeared. They argued more, blamed each other. And slowly, they began to realize something was missing. Not money, not property, something deeper. "Have you heard from Mom?" David asked one evening. Linda shook her head. "No." A long silence followed. "What if—" David hesitated. "What if we made a mistake?" Linda didn't answer, because deep down, she knew they had. Months later, Eleanor stood in front of a newly renovated building. It wasn't extravagant, but it was hers, a community center for elderly people who had nowhere to go, who had been forgotten, just like she had. A sign hung above the entrance. "Second beginnings." Eleanor smiled softly. "This is what you wanted, wasn't it?" she whispered, thinking of Thomas. Not revenge, not wealth, but purpose. One afternoon, her children found her. They looked different, humbled, uncertain. "Mom," David began, his voice breaking. "We're sorry." Eleanor looked at them quietly. She saw regret, pain, but also truth. "I know," she said gently. Linda stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "We didn't understand. We thought we were protecting ourselves." "And in doing so," Eleanor replied softly, "you forgot to protect me." Silence. Heavy. Real. "Can you forgive us?" David asked. Eleanor took a deep breath. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but holding on to pain, that wasn't the life she had fought to rebuild. "I already have," she said. And in that moment, something healed. Eleanor never returned to her old house. She didn't need to, because she had built something far greater, a life not defined by loss, but by discovery, not limited by age, but expanded by courage. And as she sat on the porch of the cabin one evening, watching the sun set behind the trees, she smiled, because at 78, she hadn't lost everything. She had finally found it.